Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It's Thursday, January 15th, 10 a.m., and we're going to talk about the Greenland crisis. We've been covering it mostly in the print side of the service, but as Europe has decided to go on this little adventure to Greenland, it's time for us to cover it a little more fully and put a couple things out that you should be thinking about when you see mainstream media making it sound like the United States is Nazis, as we always are in the light of the new generation of literature and everything else, pretty much. So, what we have now, if you see all this morning's processes, the French have sent 15 troops to Nuuk, and additional small contingents from Germany, Sweden, and Norway, the Netherlands, and the UK, probably their Alpine units and some of their special forces. The Germany are sending another aircraft with 13 soldiers for a short stay. It is officially framed as a reconnaissance mission with joint exercises to bolster NATO's footprint in the Arctic upcoming, which would be the giant flotilla of three or four ships bringing an additional couple of thousand troops through the gigantic seas of the North Atlantic in the wintertime to Greenland, where they have neither the shelter or infrastructure to handle them. All in the odd chance that the United States decides to sneak in and take Greenland by force. So we've seen the political signaling, the worst of the spoilers in Europe, French, saying Europe has a special responsibility because Greenland belongs to the European Union and it's also one of our NATO allies. Greenland does not belong to the European Union. It is a vassal or whatever you want to call it of Denmark. That does not make it so. By saying it does not make it so. The Danish Prime Minister says the defense of Greenland is a common concern for the entire NATO alliance. The Danish, well, I forget what his finance minister, his name's Rasmussen, says there is no instant threat from Russia or China that Denmark and Greenland cannot handle. Attacks the U.S. purchase annexation talk. In 2026, you trade with people, but you don't trade people. Huh. And the Prime Minister of Greenland, Jens Frederick Nielsen, says if our people were asked to choose, they would choose Denmark over the U.S. Greenland does not want to be owned, governed, or be part of the United States, which is very funny if you actually spoke to one of the Inuits that lives there. The native people of the country, regardless of whatever shit you're going to hear, are subsidized on welfare pretty much across the board by the Danes. There is a ruling elite in the country of Greenland, which has incredible ties to Denmark because they're part Dane and part native. But the straight natives definitely are more interested in the United States than an elite group that rules without probably going to the election box. Sound familiar? So you're seeing a lot of these different positions. The UK is against it. Germany's against us. All the usual suspects. The UK was a little surprising until you feel about what they're really involved with the banking industries and stuff like that. But they are all running as fast as they can to get soldiers onto the island of Greenland before the Americans land their invasion force. Now, on the American side, there is no invasion force. There's been no buildup. Ships have not really moved. President Trump has said, and he reiterates, and papers and research will show this to be true. We need Greenland, meaning the United States, for national security. He, of course, does not rule out use of force because you're constraining yourself in negotiation. And he wants to make a deal. Now, Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio have met Danish and Greenlandic officers. Talks described as constructive but with fundamental disagreement. The net assessment as of now, because of this troop movement, Europe and Denmark have moved first in the information space. They got themselves in very easily with the anti-Trump media in the United States. The media in continental Europe is also very anti-Trump because we kept telling them to stop being parasites and pay their fair share in NATO and all that kind of stuff. So what they are doing is they've packaged a small military meaningless NATO exercise as a political signal. Greenland is ours, meaning Europe's, not Denmark's. This is alliance business, and U.S. talk of annexation is reckless. Well, it couldn't have been written by the Chinese any better because the Russia and Chinese threat is very real to the island of Greenland. I keep calling it island. I think they say it's a continent or something, but it's an island as of today. And people don't get it or people don't want to get it. China is the number one rare earth cultivator, manufacturer, processor, whatever, and seller on the planet. Rare earths in Greenland would change that. Greenland is in a position to choke out a lot of Russian shipping. It would give us a jump on their submarines when they start moving around into the Atlantic. Fighter bases, which we already have at least one that I remember, and expansion of that. Because if Denmark is still in charge, they can sort of choke us out because we have a certain footprint that we're allowed to build inside of and no more. The reason this becomes even more important, this is a sidebar, Your Honor, is the British are renewing their lease through Mauritius on the island of Diego Garcia. Now, if Britain decided, since it's becoming an aggressor here in Greenland, that they were not going to allow the Americans to continue their sublease in Diego Garcia, we would have some serious problems projecting power into that part of the world. Go look it up and see what goes on there. That's where the B-2 bombers were staged when they were going to attack Iran. Because you have to remember, the other Arab countries can't let you fly over them usually because we're all in one big team in Islam. Even if we hate each other, we're one big team in Islam. So you have to fly a different direction. So that being said, let's go back to this issue because this is the decline and fall of Europe as being worth anything to talk to. All right. They have built this whole thing about the Trump invasion. They have staked their legitimacy and reputation and military savvy on this little outing, which I could have put together up at the local yacht club and been more threatening with than they're going to come up with. They are relegating themselves to second and third tier country status. Russia is watching this. And here's the question that I constantly bring up, and nobody has an answer. Who's paying for all this? Europe's broke. Europe in general is one step away from bankruptcy. Show me a political person or a financial person who will tell us anything different. They need to grab into this economy with the mining and the rare earths and the oil and all this kind of shit because they've got nothing left in their coffers and they're willing to work with Denmark or actually bully Denmark because what is Denmark going to do anyway, right? They're going to bully Denmark and they've got themselves together and they're going to go out and sit on that island and say, well, Trump can't invade as long as we're here. It'd be a violation of NATO policy. But it's a violation of NATO policy to do what they're doing right now. I forget what the chapter is, but you can look it up. They are not, they're saying they're there to protect a member state, but there's been no hostile intent. Declarations of doing it do not make for hostile intent. You don't see any reports anywhere of shipboard activities, troops being moved here and there, and the other thing. We're not prepared to be stupid enough to attack Greenland in the wintertime if we were to do so. Nobody does it. But these idiots from Europe are going to go sit those people out there. And as they die from the frost, which hopefully they will, the word will get back to the country of what a goddamn waste this was. Secondly, if they're doing this to posture against Russia, as I said, the Russians will actually be laughing at this whole thing. They'll know that Europe is not serious. Europe is trying to use this, from what they say, to build a European army of 100,000 men. And who is going to lead that? Which country has the most combat experience over there now? It's the Ukrainians, right? Who aren't members of NATO. And how good is their combat experience? They get shot a lot. A lot of people get killed, but that doesn't show you any W's, right? And they'll say, well, we don't have that many, but we have some considerable knowledge of how military works. You have two pretty inept military operations fighting each other. Both are crippled by corruption, as Vladimir Putin found out, but at least he's killing the guys that have stole all the money for the troops' boots. Whereas Zelensky's built a house in Morocco, I believe it is. Beautiful place if you can get to it. His environmental minister had the first EV Rolls Royce that was built. I saw it when it was in Germany. I got a photo somewhere of me standing in front of it. And basically kleptocracy. Not that Russia isn't either, but to say that you're going to build a 100,000 man army to then go what? You're going to put them all, garrison them in Greenland? Who's going to supply all the toilet paper? Who's going to supply all the toilet paper when they decide they want to ship them into Ukraine in a World War I trench warfare situation with space weapons, right? So what is it really all about? They are trying, like I said, desperately to contain themselves for relevance in the world. Nobody takes Europe seriously anymore. In general, nobody takes Europe seriously anymore. And they're all trying to get a little identity going. The only one who seems to have half a brain, and she's very good at what she does, is the Prime Minister of Italy. She's going her own way. The Germans are so repressive of the party that is actually the most popular. They call it far right, which is what everybody is. If you're not a socialist, you're far right. The far right party will say, I'm not going to name them because we'll get banned in Germany. Doesn't really say anything far right. It just says you have way too many illegal immigrants on welfare. And that's bad. You can't say that because it shows that the social engineering that they decided to do to pretty much outsource the crime issues that they didn't have by bringing in new people to do it, to push out the cultural European, to destroy that as a class and as a race, which is what it's been doing. It's social engineering. It's wrong. It's evil, blah, 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 blah. These little wars are going to show you that because how many people are going to want to join these countries' armies knowing that you're going to be sent to the Ukraine or to Greenland while Abu Dhabi and Abu Dhabi number two stay at home running amok in the streets, raping and murdering and setting fire to shit? You're not going to really have a big group of people joining the military for that. And if you think you're going to get those people to join the military, are you out of your mind, number one? And are you out of your mind? Why would you give them additional military training and then weapons and then let them loose? The license to kill, right? Bad idea. So what we're seeing here is, like I said, the Greenland Prime Minister has said that they would choose Denmark over the US and reject being owned or governed by America. They are a group in and unto themselves. They are an elite, almost racially elite organization that is running that country, for lack of a better term. However, they do have underlying realities. Greenland still depends on external capital, security, and infrastructure. The Inuit nationalism wants greater autonomy. That's the Eskimos or whatever you guys call them, wherever you are. Greater autonomy and resource control. They do not want permanent Danish trusteeship. The People's Republic and Russia are still going to be long-term threats, which only the newly revitalized United States can provide serious hard security for. We cannot half-ass operate on an island with political liabilities like the Danish or the EU. It just makes sense. I can't be looking over my shoulder to see if I'm going to be stabbed in the back while I'm on the island and face off against the Russians and the Chinese. First of all, China would never have the balls or the ability to actually land people, but what they will do is they will put money into the pockets of diplomats, as they are doing right now, to have them get these little inter-party operations together to try to break up NATO. Well, it doesn't take too much for us to want to break up NATO in the United States anyway, as it is just another version of USAID, but with guns and tanks. All right. It's been seen that way. But China benefits from confusion, So a divided US EU front and a Denmark that insists there is no instant threat from Russia or China gives Beijing the political space to re-enter Greenland via capital or telecom or ports or mining, because the ports and the mining are the big thing. So we assume PRC influence operations are ongoing, even if they have not become visible. But to move this project along smells Chinese. So the U.S. objective still, and I guess we got to run faster on this. Sorry. It's a big involved thing. This did not happen overnight. Go to our website, www.southfloridaconservative.com. There are a series of articles that explain exactly what's going on here, who's playing what diplomatic strategy. It is way too involved to just simply tell you the answer. But because what is the answer, right? It depends on who or what it is that you're trying to do. So objectives that the U.S. would probably want to get involved in is they have to reassert the U.S. primacy in the North American Atlantic, just as we've taken care of our issue or are taking care of our issue with the Venezuelans, and which will also be Cuba probably within the next few months, and a couple other little guys down there that have become quite problematic with the drugs and the ship operations, and I think the Bahamas are actually involved in it too. But they've been owed an ass kicking for quite some time. But the U.S. objectives in this Greenland operation are going to be, like you said, North American Atlantic is what it says it is. North American Atlantic, the Arctic is ours. We are going to run the game there too. People are going to operate, but they're going to operate under the benevolence of the United States government. So the second thing is going to be to undercut the European narrative and that this is a purely NATO EU matter by emphasizing the fact that the Inuits of Greenland want self-determination, highlighting existing US Denmark defense agreements and exposing European deployment as symbolic and self-serving. They invited themselves into this game if you follow the paperwork. France started it, Germany and England jumped in. They're the ones that are moving and shaking this because as their empires crumble further under the weight of Islamism, they are looking elsewhere on where they're going to get the money to keep this thing propped up until they can breed out or move out the existing inhabitants of the country. It is that type of situation, guys. If you don't see it that way, that's fine. It doesn't make me outrageous or a conspiracy theorist, but this is how it was done in the past. This is how they wanted to do it back in the days, the Khmer Rouge days, the Mao Zedong days. All those things were to get rid of problematic people and put in docile idiots. Well, the Islamics are not that docile, but they are kind of idiots. The ones that we have now, not the ones that were smart and never left their country. So also to deter the PRC and the Russian exploitation and to remind Europe of its structural dependence, the energy security and the markets, and its proper tier, which is below the United States in strategic decision making. What they have forgotten, and Denmark never had to worry about, but these other three jokers, if the United States cuts off natural gas service to those three countries while they're still being boycotted by mostly Russia, even though Russia sells their enemies the gas that they then pay money to Russia that buys weapons to attack Ukraine with. Nobody sees that as some kind of behind the scenes ripoff, right? Nobody sees that as an issue. Somebody has to. I mean, I don't have a doctorate. I could tell you that, right? So they are dependent on too many other people for their energy. And it's only January 15th. So if we were to shut off liquefied natural gas to them, we were to deny them some other markets, which we are able to do, it's going to become awfully chilly in Germany and France and the UK. Germany, of course, already having been attacked by terrorists in Berlin, which knocked most of the power grid out and put 40 or 50,000 houses without electricity entirely, let alone how many commercial buildings. We've discussed it before. It's called the Vulcan Group. We did a paper on it. So that's what we have going on there as we speak. There are going to be a lot of things coming on. I would suggest if you're interested in this, go to our page. It's also on Substack, same name, but www.southfloridaconservative.com. This is going to be the kind of power play that will settle the issue as to where Europe belongs. I say they're a third tier. I think they're at Portugal level. I'm more afraid of the Portuguese than I am the combined EU military. And I'm serious about that. They don't have the money to ride into battle too often. If you see the old days where they were crying with Margaret Thatcher when she went and had the Falkland Islands War, that's how they pitched this in the office, except they don't benefit like that from this. And if they were stupid enough to shoot at anything of ours, none of them would return home. And I can say that for a fact, the minute that those ships pull out of the harbor and leave the 3 mile limit, they are going to have a wolf pack of submarines around them. They're not going to see them. They're going to be there. The planes will be up. The satellites are up. If we wanted to, we could jam their communications the entire way. They'd act like a bunch of assholes. We're not going to play it that much because these guys are trigger happy to prove something to keep their government going. They have elections too. So, got a little wordy. Sorry about that, guys. Sue me. If you have questions about this particular topic, feel free to send them to us. We'll point you out where these things are. There's a whole layer, like I said, as to the people that are living in Greenland, who really wants the Danes and who really wants the Americans. Nobody can be left alone there, unfortunately, because of their economic system, I'm sorry, which was Denmark just throwing them all on welfare. Once again, the evils of welfare, right? So we're offering jobs and economy, things like that, and no control by the Danes. Also, they would be more like a Micronesia under the kind of compact that we would have, Guam, all that kind of stuff. If anybody knows any of those places, the Virgin Islands, something like that would be the government style that we would be operating there. We just need the bases and we need the ability to do what we want to do when we want to do it. So that's about it for now. Little watered down at the end, but hey, what can I tell you? It's a rough day here on Thursday, and we're going to be doing some other things today. So talk to you later on.